Friends, welcome to video 28 in our series Principles of Equity Investing. We have been talking about different valuation methods, and the last method is time value based. But as we've already seen in the previous video, time value calculations do depend on our expectations, our requirement of return. And therefore, in this video, before we actually go to usage of time value in equity valuation, I'm going to talk about how do we estimate our required return for valuation purposes. You may remember in video 27, we had looked at valuation of a bond from the perspective of two different people who had two different requirements or expectation of return from that bond. And that's when we discussed how the value of that bond to two different individuals will differ because their expectations are different. This is the whole idea of time value, that time value finally is not objective, it is subjective to your expectation. Higher the expectation, lower the value. Lower the expectation, higher the value. You would remember we discussed about that in the previous video, but we are going to refresh that again in this video. So welcome to this video. It's going to be very interesting for another reason, that I'm going to talk about the concept of beta. You must have heard about the beta of a share and how it has a relationship in explaining the volatility of a particular share. Here I'm going to talk about that with detailed examples of high beta, low beta, and beta close to 1, and I'm going to talk about number of companies in these three categories. So I think it's going to be exciting. And more importantly, I'm going to close this discussion by using the beta strategies in terms of when do we actually invest in a low beta company, when do we invest in a high beta company, and how will that benefit us. So this is going to be an exciting video. Let's go through it one by one, but at the outset, I would like to just define the agenda of this whole conversation. So what's the agenda for this video? A quick review of what we discussed in video 27. It will help you to refresh the time value concepts. If you're not fresh with them, I would encourage you to even have a look at that video 27 before you invest your time here, because these two videos are going to be very important and they're going to help you in many ways in terms of analyzing your investments, analyzing that your hard-earned money is actually invested at a good return. So that's very critical, and that you can have a look at if you feel you're not very comfortable with time value or some time has gone. But anyway, on the next slide, I'm going to take a fresh and a quick look at important contents of video 27 anyway. What else am I going to cover in this video? What are the potential cash flows from equity? I think that's going to be easy, but we will talk about it. How do we make an estimate of the required return? This is the crux of the video today. The concept of beta, this is going to be exciting as I've already promised, and I'm going to present with you or before you some data of Indian companies as on the date I have made this video, and I'm also going to take an example of how to arrive at this required return with a specific example. And lastly, as I promised in the previous slide, I'm going to also talk about beta strategies. So it's going to be fun. Let's get going. So the important points that we learned in video 27, we said amount and value are different. You would remember that. I had taken an example of somebody who takes a friendly loan from us. He or she takes, say, X amount today, returns that same amount after 3 years. Amount to amount it has matched, but value to value it has not matched, because when the money is returned to you after 3 years, its value today is going to be much less. Of course, I am assuming here economies which have inflation and therefore a positive interest rate. Somebody from a developed country where interest rates have turned negative, inflation has given way to deflation, they may be quite happy to receive money late, because if they were to receive money today, the bank may charge something to hold that money in custody. So the dynamic is going to be different in those countries. But in most developing economies, we have positive inflation, positive interest rates. So we are talking about that scenario here. Then, of course, we discussed about calculation of future values. by using the compounding formula, and similarly the calculation of present values, where what we do is we actually take a factor which is not a multiplication but a division as compared to calculation of future value. Just refresh that concept if you like from the previous video. Then we of course said that present value, suppose you're going to receive an amount in future, its present value is going to be less than the amount which is going to be received in a later period, the amount of cash flow which is actually going to be happening. And more delay in the future, less its present or today's value. So if somebody, one of your relatives who has taken X amount from you with a promise to return in 2 years, but instead returns 5 years later, while amount to amount it may match, from a value perspective, the person who has taken the money from you has actually destroyed far more value if he or she returns it after 5 years instead of 2 years. So more delay in the future, less its present value. So this is something we discussed and learned. And using that concept, we had said how valuation of an investment can be done, how it is linked with future cash flows, and we had taken some examples also there. And finally, we had also taken an example of bond valuation, how different expectations of investors results in different values, because finally when you convert a future cash flow into its today's value, you are going to use some benchmark rate, and that's going to be an expectation of return that you have. That's the return that you require, and what your requirement is can be different from somebody else's requirement, and therefore the valuation of that, when we discount the future cash flows to today's value, is naturally going to be different. And that's the whole reason why trading happens in bond, stock and other markets, because everybody puts a different value to it based on different expectations. So these things we had discussed, and as I mentioned, you may like to refresh video 27 before you get into more details of this video. But video 27, this video 28 and the next video 29, they're all going to be linked because of this time value idea. But in this video, I'm going to take a slight detour, and we are going to talk about this expectation, this requirement of return itself, because finally, unless we resolve that issue, how do we use time value concept? Because finally, when we do a discounting, we have to use some rate of interest, some rate of return, and that is something that we are going to discuss in the context of shares today. Let's see how it pans out. So what are the potential cash flows from equity first? So one is stream of dividends. Now these dividends are also expected to grow from year to year, no doubt about that. And price that we realize when we sell is also going to be a cash flow. But the problem is, today when we are going to take an investment decision, we can't obviously find out what is the price at which I am going to sell. So can we get into some estimation of what is the potential price that may prevail that time? That of course we are going to talk about in the next video, when I'm going to talk about different models which are used for valuation using dividend as an important cash flow. So that's where we may have to also estimate the potential price that may prevail at a later date. But we will discuss that later when we come to it, not now. But I just wanted to talk about these cash flows which are important in valuation of equity. So as I mentioned earlier, for arriving at value, we need to have a benchmark. We had used two benchmarks in the earlier video. One individual had a different expectation, another individual had a much higher expectation. And that's what we said, that the value is relative to our benchmark, that everybody has a different value connotation. Value is subjective, it's not an objective number. And then we compare that value with price. If somebody finds that the value is more than price, the person is going to place a buy order. If somebody thinks price is more than value, that person is going to place a sell order. So that's going to be natural, and that's the reason why trading keeps on happening in the market. So these benchmarks, as we had seen in the earlier video, we had used for discounting the future cash flows. So whatever cash flows we saw in the previous slide in case of equities, we have to follow the same principle. Now, how do we arrive at the benchmark of how much return would we require from a stock? Now, the problem is we have so many shares. Are we going to apply a uniform rate to them of expectation? We can say that yes, from the market I have a certain expectation, but can the expectation be the same for every stock? That may be slightly difficult because riskiness, volatility of every stock differs. And more the volatility, more is the risk. If more is the risk, my benchmark has to be higher. If risk is lower, my benchmark will be lower. As simple as that. So that's what we're going to actually explore further. And as I just said, higher the risk, higher should be the return. And required return can therefore be calculated using some estimate of risk. And that's what beta is going to help us. That's going to be exciting, friends. So let us explore this concept of beta a little more with some example. Friends, here is an example of a high beta stock. What you can see here is on the y-axis, we have the return on stock, and on the x-axis, return on market. Now, every day, every week, every month, there is a return that can be calculated for a stock. There can be a return which can be calculated for the market. Now, if we were to plot the return for the stock versus the return on the market on a graph, then we can actually find different dots that you can see on this graph also. Now, this is of course a hypothetical example, but that's just to convey to you how we can create this plot. Now, imagine if you are able to create a line of best fit, which fits into these dots in such a way that it minimizes the deviation from that line with each of those points looked at collectively. That can be called as the line of best fit, and beta is essentially the slope of the line. What you can see here is the slope is quite high, and when the slope is quite high, we say that the beta is more than 1. If slope was exactly 45 degrees, imagine if the line was exactly between the y and x axis, and we are going to see an example of this in a later slide. But for now, this is a very high slope, and therefore we say beta is more than 1. Higher the beta, higher is the risk, and naturally our expectation of return from such a stock with high beta will also be high. Now on the next slide, let's take a few examples of companies which I have culled out from a website and collated together, and I have grouped them differently. So some high beta stocks, some medium beta stocks, and some low beta stocks, and we are going to see that. So just to repeat, beta is the slope of the line, and high beta means the slope is high, more than 1, and naturally the volatility is going to be substantially more than the market. Now let's have a look at some data. Some examples of high beta companies. Now you will see that number of columns are there. First is the name of the company, then what is the closing price on a particular day, that's going to be on 27th of May. Then the next column is where beta is actually calculated by this company called as topstockresearch.com, and this data is, as I said, is as of 27th of May 2020. So daily 1M range actually means that daily data of that stock's movement has been mapped against the daily movement of the market index, let us say a Nifty, and then this data is observed over a 1-month period, and using that range the beta is calculated. Then in the next column we see similar calculation for 3 months using daily data. Then we have a weekly data where weekly return is calculated for the stock, weekly return is calculated for the market, and the two are compared and analyzed, and that is weekly 1-year range. Then we can have weekly 2-year range. then fortnightly 2-year range, monthly 2-year range, and finally monthly 4-year range. So while grouping these companies, I have used the last column, which has a monthly data for a long period of 4 years. So what we find here is Tata Motors as on 27th of May had a beta in the last column of 1.97. That means over a period of 4 years, it is a extremely high beta stock. But if you look at last 3 months, it may not be a very high beta from that perspective, but I have taken a long period in classifying these stocks. So what you find is Tata Motors has highest beta at 1.97 and GAIL India Limited has a relatively low beta as compared to Tata Motors, but still higher than 1, which is 1.20, which is the last row that you can see. Now let us look at companies with beta close to 1. So beta close to 1, as I was mentioning, this kind of a line where it is almost 45 degrees. As you can see, the slope is close to 1. So in other words, beta close to 1 means this particular share is as volatile as the market. When beta is far more than 1, as we saw the previous data, the share is going to be more volatile than the market. So Tata Motors with a beta of 1.97 will be 1.97 times more volatile than the Nifty index as a whole. So more the volatility, more naturally is the risk ascribed and more would be the expectation of return. So what we see here is beta is very close to 1, and let us see some examples of this. So here are examples of companies with beta close to 1. It's not exactly 1, but the range is quite close. So I have taken from Titan, which is 1.10, to Eicher Motors, which is 0.84. And you have many companies in between. So for example, in ITC, if you see the last column of monthly 4-year data, which has been analyzed by that company, you will find it 1.01, very close to 1. In other words, ITC moves as much as generally the market moves over a long period. It doesn't mean that this will be true every day or every week or every month, but over a period of 4 years, that has been quite true. Now, as I mentioned earlier also, the source for this is topstockresearch.com and the data is as of 27th of May 2020. Of course, as the period changes over a period of time, these beta numbers would also undergo change because they are relevant for us at the time we take an investment decision. Now let us look at a low beta stock. So beta is less than 1, it is going to be less volatile than the market. As you can see, the slope is considerably less, and what we find here is the volatility of these shares will be less, and naturally we would ascribe a low risk to this. Now how do we convert this understanding into setting our expectation or requirement of return from different stocks with different beta values? I am going to show you that as well through a gradual logical explanation. So let us see how it unfolds. So here are some examples of low beta companies. Kotak Mahindra Bank 0.80, and at the bottom you see Infosys 0.26, say Sun Pharma at 0.35. So extremely low beta, low volatility as compared to the market. Now let us see how do we transform this into some kind of a risk measurement and therefore measuring our expected return from this investment. Again, the same source, topstockresearch.com, and the data is as on 27th of May 2020. So the logic is higher the risk, higher should be the return. We discussed it briefly. How do we estimate the required return? That's the crux of the issue. So we all know that stock market as measured by an index gives a return higher than a risk-free asset. Obviously, why do we invest in stock market? Why don't we invest in a treasury bill issued by the government and be happy with a very low return like 6%? We go for a stock market investment where the return is going to be say high, let us say at 14%. So unless the equity market provides a much higher return, why would anybody take risk and invest in the market if the return is the same as a risk-free asset like a treasury bill issued by the government of India? So obviously there has to be some risk premium over and above the risk-free rate. So we'll of course take an example, and this risk premium naturally is the excess return that the stock market should generate over and above the risk-free rate. So let's call it as market premium. We will build an example. Let us discuss how much should be the premium for a stock before we go to an example. Since beta denotes volatility, risk premium should be in proportion to beta. Logical, isn't it? If there is a stock which has more volatility, we naturally attribute more risk to it, and naturally the risk premium has to be high, at least in the same proportion as the beta in relation to the market. Now here I must also clarify that whatever I have been saying as the market, how do we measure the market? Are we going to take thousands of stocks? No. We usually take any index, either it could be Nifty or it could be Sensex, and we look at the volatility of a stock in comparison with that index. That's what we mean by the market. So thought of clarifying this. If beta is 1, the required premium from the stock should be the same as market premium. If beta is more than 1, naturally the required premium from the stock should be more than the market premium in the same proportion. And similarly, if beta is less than 1, the required premium from the stock should be less than the market premium in the same proportion. Quite often, these companies with beta less than 1 are called as bellwether stocks or defensive stocks. You must have heard those terms. Now, let's look at an example. Here is some data. Let's say that the stock market has given a return of 14% over a long period of say 30 years and has a similar potential in the future. We assume that it will continue to give this kind of a return of 14% down the line also. And let's say the return on the risk-free security like a treasury bill was 6%. So how much was the market premium? 14% minus 6%, which is equal to 8%. Now here is some data about a few companies, which is the real data that I presented earlier. So I have picked up 3 companies from 3 different groups. Tata Motors 1.97 beta, ITC 1.01 beta, Infosys 0.26 beta. Now how much was the risk premium? As we calculated earlier, 14 minus 6, 8% is the risk premium. So risk premium on the share has to be in multiple in accordance with the beta. If Tata Motors has 1.97 is the beta, the risk premium should be 1.97 times the market risk premium of 8%. ITC should be 1.01 times. Infosys needs to be only 0.26 times. So how much is the risk premium for different shares? Tata Motors, the risk premium will be very high, 15.76, ITC 8.08, Infosys 2.08. So are we going to expect only this much return from these stocks? Wait, I think we need to add the risk-free rate also, because in the first place, the market was giving 14%. We had kept aside that 6% and only focused on the premium. Now we need to reconsider this 6%, and therefore the required return will have to be A, risk premium, plus B, risk-free rate together. So Tata Motors, the expected or required return would be 21.76%, ITC will be 14.08%, Infosys will be 8.08%. So obviously market is attributing higher risk to Tata Motors, relatively lower risk to ITC, and much lower risk to Infosys. Now I'm not getting into the merits of it. I'm just only telling you based on the beta. So now can you guess the relationship between the required return and valuation? As we can see here, there are 3 different required returns for 3 different shares. I think you guessed it right. The relationship between required return and valuation has to be inverse. Higher the required return, lower the valuation, and vice versa. You know the logic already. The logic is that if a cash flow is going to happen sometime in the future and if my expectation is very high at 21.76%, I'm going to discount it and I arrive at its today's value using 21.76. If my expectation is only 8.08%, then naturally I would discount it at 8.08% only. And as I have explained in video 27, higher the required return, the present value of a future cash flow will naturally be much less as compared to when the required return itself is much lower. So the value that investors would attribute to Infosys would tend to be higher in relative terms as compared to Tata Motors. So I'm going to take some examples of this and build on this in the next video in terms of how do we actually calculate equity value based on time value concept, and some models also I'm going to discuss. So I really look forward to your continued patronage and continue to explore the next video. But before I conclude, I would like to share with you the beta strategies. Now we have already seen that there are some stocks with medium beta, some with very low, some with very high. So beta works both ways during rise and fall. So in other words, if beta of a particular share is very high, then the rise can also be dramatically high, fall can also be dramatically high. Similarly, if beta is very low, rise will be moderate, fall will also be moderate. So when would we go for low beta stocks which are going to provide less volatility? When we have a very high concern about a possible fall in the market after a significant rise. Now, if a significant rise has happened, most ideal thing to happen is we actually exit from the stock market altogether and keep our money in cash or in some other asset form, and then again reinvest when the market has fallen. But for some investors, they have a long only policy. They're not going to exit and enter again. They stay invested. Now, at least when your money is in the market, what you can do is at least move your money into those stocks which are low beta, because if the market corrects, then you will not be hurt so much. But if you have invested in a high beta stock and if the market corrects, you're going to pay a very heavy price because the fall is going to be very dramatic. On the other hand, when the market is in the bottoming process, it has already fallen, there is a lot of fear in the market, and now there is a likelihood that stocks are going to go up. You should actually enter into high beta stocks, because from there they will provide a dramatically higher return as compared to low beta stocks. Low beta stocks will gradually move, but high beta stocks will move rapidly. So I hope you got idea about the beta strategies. So I hope you like this video. If you have, press the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Do offer your comments, share this video, and of course do suggest topics on which I can also create more videos. Thank you for your patronage. See you soon.